All right, so following on sort of the trend that we're looking at in this block, there's something about being realistic about what the state of the world is. We are advocates for passkeys. We understand that probably the most prevalent form of MFA being used today are SMS OTPs. It just is what it is today. Maybe not forever, but it is what it is today. And so, when we look at, providing you all with ways to protect yourselves, we need to look at what the current state of play is as well. And so, understanding that, we have Dr. Carlos Sanchez from TransUnion here to talk to you about what strategies you should be putting into place around authentication, including SMS OTP. Welcome.
Thank you. No pictures, please. Good morning, everybody. I don't know how my voice is today because of all that singing last night. Don't stop believing that was me. But oh, thank you. So before we start, I'm going to try to get a lot of information in a little amount of time, but I want to tell you a little bit about myself. My name is Carlos Sanchez. Dr. Sanchez was my dad, so you can call me Carlos. But I've been working in cybersecurity and fraud for about 30 years. So I take a lot of pride in what I do. I'm a certified ethical hacker. I've competed in DEF CON a few years back. The reason why I'm telling you this is because pretty much all of the things that we're going to be doing have to do with that. So before we start, I want to tell you a story. The story is about Sarah. Sarah is a lady that one day as she's going to work, suddenly she loses access to her phone. Okay, so it takes about a half an hour for her to get to her house. And lately, there have been some issues with network carriers in which they have lost access to because of software issues or something that's unfortunately become very common. When she gets home and she gets into the Wi-Fi system, she realizes that there have been some weird texts asking for changes in her accounts. So this is where her nightmare begins. So as we go through it, one thing, there's a lot of, I didn't build this deck. I'm going to go quickly into certain slides that I was forced to have, and we're going to get to the meat and potatoes later. Okay, so we have statistics that say that in 2023, this amount of breaches have happened. So what happened to Sarah was not a one-off. It was something that's very common nowadays. Okay, one case that is not here, August 17, 2024. Okay, about 25 billion records were exposed from this information carrier. Mine was one of them. I go through the web and I do research and I see that my information is out there. So if my information is out there, probably all of us have our information out there. So it's good to know, create awareness of all of this information that's out there. Okay, so the other day I was watching Coleslaw talking in his presentation. Okay, he's there? So how are you, bro?
I'm watching you now.
Okay, good. So you mentioned something very important about this, what we own, who we are, and the information that we actually know. So for all of us that sell services in the ID verification and all of those things, we may or may not agree with the fact that this is becoming obsolete. It's always going to be there. But in our reality nowadays, with the passwordless information and all of those things, most of the devices, the information that we own is what's actually going to be affected. So this is key for all of us that went through the certified fraud examiner process. We are very familiar with this. This is what mostly of the people are actually guiding to. Now, let's go back to Sarah real quick. Okay, so one-time passwords is a technology that's actually used to protect us. Most banks, most insurance carriers, a lot of them actually use one-time passcodes to validate us. Information that's important here, 35% of businesses cite one-time passcodes as their main second factor of authentication. The first one is KBAs, okay? Now, in Sarah's case, what was actually supposed to protect her was her demise. See, so it's important to be aware that this is something that can pretty much happen to any one of us, okay? So my friend Fernando said something last night that was really important, that even though one-time passcodes are secure, they also pose a risk. Okay, so when we move, this is the meat and potatoes, okay? So how many of you have seen me this week? Okay, so there are a couple of you that have seen me, and you have seen me wearing I call a peacock blue shirt. I hate it, but I use it with a purpose, okay? So for the people that have seen me, good to see you again. But with people that have not seen me, I have been seeing you. Okay, I'm the type of person that you should never trust because I am a social engineer. I'm a social hacker. My feast is usually on the breakfast table. When we're sitting in breakfast over here, I see people like you and a lot of people opening the laptops. Okay? This morning, one guy sits next to me. His password was purple. Okay? I personally don't need to see what your password is. I can actually hear what you're typing, and I can come up with that. But he wrote it right in front of me. See, that's the type of thing that a social engineer does. I was talking to a friend of mine that's also a hacker yesterday, and we had such a great conversation. But he's a password cracker, and I call myself a password getter, okay? Yesterday, I was sitting on a session, amazing session, and this lady sits right next to me, and she leaves her purse open. All I needed to do was this. Because I am reformed, I only took a picture of her purse. So if you want to see it, please see me later, because I can actually show it to you. But those are the types of things that on events like this, you need to be aware of. And people, you know, I always say that common sense is the sixth sense, but it's also the less common of all senses. See, because nobody figures out, hey, we are here professionals and we are here standing in a security event, but unfortunately we forget that not everybody is to be trusted. Again, this is actually how SimSwap started. Okay, I can go into details later. I'll be here and I'll be around the rest of the day. But since we started with people trying to take over information on crypto wallets, okay? People will stand here and they will brag about how many millions they have made, okay? And they put their name and the email, and that's all I need, okay? You know what the worst, most dangerous site is out there about getting information with people? LinkedIn. Okay, LinkedIn, not Facebook, not Twitter, not Instagram, LinkedIn. I can tell you how I do my magic with it later. But fraud usually starts 99% of the time with stolen credentials, with stolen identities. I can get that buying it over the dark web, or a guy like me that loves the social engineering part of it. So if the fraudster is smart, they're going to go and buy a burner phone. They're not usually going to use theirs to change the SIM. We went to the Proof conference this morning. It was really interesting, and he was actually talking about how the SIM connects to the telco, and this is how they bill you, and this is how they actually make the calls. So he has a prepaid phone service, and he already has the PII information of the owner of that device. Okay? I don't necessarily need to have that information, because once I have a mark, like the purple guy, once I have a mark, I can actually call the contact center and smooth my way into it. What do? I'm not going to tell you everything that I do, but we can go later and talk about it. But with the personal detail, I call the contact center, and I have already scoped the IVR. What does that mean? I'm going to call in beforehand, and I'm going to see what questions and what cues I actually need to bypass in order to get where I need to go. Because usually they actually tell you the questions that I'm going to need in order to move further into the queue or talk to somebody or get to the particular queue that it is. Okay? And I actually pass the authentication and I request a SIM swap. I have this number and I have to actually move it. I lost my phone, or I bought a new phone, or all of those things. And this actually applies to the new iPhones and new models that have eSIMs, okay? So I don't need to actually take the SIM out. Okay, so it's very important to know that this is actually what's happening. Okay, I can actually, again, call and get that. It's very easy. Usually in these enterprises and these companies, the contact center agents are the less paid employees. In the competitions that I've participated on, I speak Spanish, as you can figure out by my accent. So the first thing that I do is like, do you want to speak Espanol? That's where I go, because they're even paid less than the ones here in the United States. And I can smooth my way into it. Okay, how many kids do you have? What do you do? How long have you been there? And people seem to like, hey, I need to change my SIM. You know, and then when I went to college, I took theater lessons. So I can actually change my voice to sound like an FBI agent or to sound like a Brazilian nanny. Okay, and I make the changes, boom, and I'm in. I don't need that much time to actually take over all of your accounts. Remember, this is not necessarily aleatory. I see and I know who is going to be my victim. That's what we call the mark. So by the time that I do that, I am probably going to know already which bank accounts do you own, what your crypto wallet is going to be. There is a certain amount of banks, and 90% of us use the same. So I'm going to start putting in numbers and putting in letters to see, do you want to change? And that's how people actually lose all of their money and how life changes, just like Sarah did. Well, I have two. Now, part of it, I'm going to talk to this about real quick. Okay, so there are now man-of-the-middle attacks. The reason why this is here, a few weeks ago, a coworker of mine, her son, went to buy a pair of Nike shoes. Coincidentally, the moment that he's buying the shoes, he gets a call from his bank. Banks usually never call you. okay, saying that, hey, there has been some fraud, and I need your username and password so that I can clear it up. The kid is 17, he was really smart, and he hung up and he didn't buy the shoes. And she calls me, hey, this happened, and I'm like, that's exactly what it is. That's a man-in-the-middle attack, because you're going to have a fraudster faking that you're going to have some type of bank transaction that it's suspicious. Okay, so these are the types of things that we're starting to see more and more. How many of us have gotten a text saying that hey, you have a parcel stuck on the mail and stuff like that? You know what that means? Your information is out there exposed. So anybody can be a victim. Okay? So just to be aware, we have talked about this week. And I have, every time that I go to a session, this conference has been so fantastic that I have had to change my talk track, because I learned something new from everyone that I go. Okay, now, we were talking earlier about this. Now the industry has the technology to protect your phone's information. Okay, we can actually apply network forensics so that we actually know, hey, has this SIM been swapped once, twice, 3 times in a week? Okay, this is very important. Why? Because if I decide to SIM swap, what I do now is I make the changes, and when I'm done changing, I switch it back to the actual user to avoid. But that information actually gets recorded. Okay, so we can see whether that reassignment of the SIM has been changed, how many times that number has been called forwarded to another. So I can actually do that, and I can actually see that my phone is being answered by somebody else. Okay, there's the other thing, the attributes over here. Okay, there's something that's called actually phishing, okay? And the phone, I am actually able to use an app faking your information. Okay, so those types of things we are actually able to recognize by using phone intelligence and network intelligence. Again. Okay, now, I'm going to go through this real quick. The government is now trying to do something about it. So they have actually come out with new laws that are actually going to help the carriers protect themselves by making it stricter that those changes don't happen. Now, what happens with the government is that they come out with this, but that's not enough for us, because the government becomes more restrictive and the fraudsters become smarter. Okay, so out of this is what I want you to remember. This is not enough, so we can actually go through it. Now, this is the end. I had 20 slides, and I just shortened it to 10. Okay, but what is it that we can actually do to protect ourselves? Okay, this is why we're here, aren't we? If I have a device that doesn't require authentication, that's a plus, okay? Because I will not have to engage into any type of conversation with an agent. I forgot his name, but when they were actually talking on the keynote, the person that works in the airline from New Zealand, he was actually explaining how they do that in the call center. Fantastic. Me, personally, I had never heard that before. I've talked to him, and he explained me how to do it. But this is key, trying to take away the human factor that can be a victim to people like us. Okay, so as we were talking, The telephony data is out there, okay? I don't know if you have, if some of us are technical enough to know what the SS7 is. Okay, Signal E7 is the actual communication protocol that networks, when I say networks, I'm talking about carriers, actually use to talk to themselves. That's how T-Mobile sends data to AT&T. That's how AT&T sends data to Verizon, all of that. That system is very old. It's about 50 years old. Very easy to hack because there have been no major improvements or no changes. Carriers know that, but they haven't done anything about it. There are some YouTube videos in which they show how can I actually modify that so that I can actually hack into a person. Multi-factor authentication, we have talked a lot about that this week. But if you're going to use MFA, you have to have some biometric process in there so that it's actually valuable. Instead of using KBAs that everybody can actually find out those questions. We already talked about OTP and how all of those things change. Spoofing is the word that I was looking for earlier, in which you can actually have a service that can actually fake my phone into another one. It's pure impersonation now. Probably for me, this is the most important one. How are we going to educate our employees and our consumers into how that common sense doesn't become the less common sense of all senses, okay? So we need to train, we need to let the customers know not to do certain things, okay? So, as a recap, okay, what can we do, okay, to protect ourselves? Number one, don't do things in conferences that expose yourselves. Okay, I can tell you all the things that I have seen this week. First of all, the purple guy. It's sort of ironic that you come to a passkey conference and you're using those types of passwords. Okay, ladies, close your purses. Those are the types of things. Look at this one, she's actually closing hers. Okay, so those are the types of things that I need. I didn't need to steal that woman's purse or that wallet. All I needed was to take a picture of her driver's license. See, I don't need that much information to make them a mark. Okay, so be clear into what you need to do. Protect yourselves with that information that's out there. Okay, now that all of that information, August 17, is out there, I highly recommend everybody to freeze your credit. Okay, it's a service that's totally free. You go on a website, Experian, TransUnion, and Equifax, and you can actually request that. That's the only way that nobody's going to be able to take over your information. Okay, so thank you. I have the power of holding you here longer and
Forever.
not going to lunch, but if you have any
Forever.
questions, please, by all means.
Is anybody wondering if you're one of the people that he's got stuff on? Because I sure am. I had one thing I wanted to kind of tell you or get your feedback on real quick. So, because when you were talking about the consumer or like awareness, I mean, that's obviously a hard thing to do, right? So Craig Newmark, who we refer to as Craig from Craigslist, he's one of our underwriters for Passkey Central. He's very, enthusiastic about passwordless authentication. But one of the projects that he's doing is, and it's an initiative called Wait 9 Seconds for consumers. So it's really about taking a pause before taking an action. So wait 9 seconds and kind of think like, does this seem legit? Before you like press on that thing or you answer that thing. So I thought that was like actually very interesting because I find like my whole spiel is like, you can't train consumers to be like social engineering experts and blah, blah, blah. However, you know, taking a pause like that could actually like make you think, okay, like this seems shady, let me like follow up and not do something immediate. I just like wondering what your feedback is on that.
That's absolutely right. Me, for example, I tell my wife and I tell my kids, it's probably related, not necessarily the same, but with online shopping, you become sometimes addicted to it because it's like paper. So I tell them, wait 25 to 30 minutes before you actually click buy to see if you really need it. Okay, so that's very common. Now, we have talked a lot during the week about account recovery and all of those things. A lot of that can actually be stopped by taking that pause. Is this guy really trying to approach me, or the email that I got at 2 a.m. in the morning? Sometimes people just fall for it, you see, because I mean, I've fallen for it. By mistake, I am trying to delete an email, I press click on it, and I have gotten viruses in my computer. I have been victim of fraud, even though I have X amount of years of experience. So that's absolutely the issue is, how do we tell everybody that's something that they need to work with? But you're absolutely right. That's logical.
That was really interesting because, like, this is a campaign that they're planning to, run consumer-wide because he's dedicated a lot of funding to consumer education around this stuff. But I thought that was a really interesting way because, like, a lot of social engineers push immediacy on you. Like, this is an emergency. You have to do something right now, or you're going to get arrested, or you're going to get all your money stolen. It's like, whoa, hold on. Like,
I was talking yesterday. I have morals, okay? So my dad and my mom did a great job, and I don't steal. That's not something that can happen. But cybersecurity attacks, okay? 3 things need to happen. Number 1, there is the reconnaissance. Remember when I told you earlier that I don't pick somebody random? I already know who I am going to attack ahead of hand. So that's 1. Number 2, the attack. Somebody needs to attack. Somebody needs to send that email. Somebody needs to make that happen. Number 3, the cash in. Okay, so I can do number 1 and number 2, but I don't do number 3. Very seldomly, one hacker or one fraudster can do the 3 things. Okay, so they work in gangs and they look for mules to cash in and then send the money overseas or something like that. Okay, so it's very important to let the people know that those things happen. Sometimes it's just that, how are you going to do that? I don't know, I'm way out of time. Okay, but.
Now it's just us talking, so please.
No, but I mean,
thank you so much.
Sure, I worked at AT&T and I worked at Verizon, and you would not believe the amount of fraudsters that go to the contact centers and wait for those people to come out so that they can bribe them. Something like that sometimes is almost impossible to work with, but those laws that the government is passing is actually helping a lot with those types of changes.
Please help me to thank Carlos again for a great presentation. Thank you so much.
I'll be around, so if you have any other questions.
We're terrified at this point. It's fine.